Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Chancellor with Austin Water. Thank you for being here for our Ullrich Water Treatment Plant community meeting. We're glad to have you here. I'm going to go over our agenda quickly, and then we'll get into our meeting. We'll just start with some logistics. My coworker Lydia and I will explain how you can participate in the meeting here on Zoom. We'll do introductions. You're going to see some new faces. We've had some folks retire who you've been accustomed to working with at Ullrich Water Treatment Plant. So we have some new people for you to meet. We'll have a short presentation that will include an operations update and an update on the sound survey that Austin Water will be doing. It will be brief because our primary objective tonight is to hear from you and answer your questions. So I want to assure you that there'll be plenty of time for that, and then we will conclude the meeting. So I want to ask my coworker Lydia to cover logistics of how to use the Zoom tool to participate in the meeting tonight.
Hey everybody, it doesn't look like we have anyone calling in from their phone, but just in case, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask a question during the Q&A, you're going to hit *6 to raise your hand to be unmuted, or *9 to raise your hand to be unmuted, and then *6 and I'll unmute you. If you're joining from a computer and you want to use the Q&A or the chat function, just take your mouse and scroll down towards the bottom black bar of your Zoom window and you'll see the chat bar and the Q&A. So you can type questions in at any point throughout the presentation and then we'll save them for the Q&A section. And I think that's it for me. If you wanted, you could change your name, but it looks like all of you have put your names in there. You can also chat to me directly. So if you have any technical things, any issues with Zoom, just use that chat feature at any point throughout the meeting and I'll help you. Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Lydia. Really appreciate your help. I know I definitely need it figuring all this technology out. So, you know, we typically have meetings like this in person, and over the past year, we've adapted to having these online meetings. We're working to make it as interactive as possible. Like I said, we'll have a short presentation and then we will be able to answer your questions through the Q&A feature. And if you really want to speak, if you do want to speak, we will have an opportunity for that also. And we'll be able to unmute you so you can speak directly to the team or ask your questions directly. So now we'll get into introductions and I'll ask Stephanie to start us off.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephanie Sue. I'm the operations manager responsible for the operations and maintenance of the 3 water treatment plants owned and operated by Austin Water.
My name is Brian Barnett. I'm the project sponsor for CFP projects at Ullrich Water Treatment Plant.
And I'm Emily. I know you heard from me already. I'll just tell you a little bit more about my role. So I do community outreach for construction projects that Austin Water does around the city. And I am your liaison for concerns. I'm always happy to get you connected with staff and to provide updates. And we'll go to Julie next.
Hello, I'm Julie Hollinsworth. I'm the division manager over the 3 water treatment plants.
Good evening. I'm Michael Mulgrew. I'm the Ulrich plant superintendent.
Thank you all. And next, I'll get to the next slide here and we'll hear from Stephanie. Short presentation to give you all some updates.
Thanks, Emily. I wanted to start with a really quick plant overview of Ulrich. As I mentioned, there are 3 water treatment plants here in the city of Austin, and Ulrich is one of those 3. It was built over 50 years ago in 1968 and upgraded about 15 years ago in 2006 to get us from 100 million gallons per day capacity up to 167 million gallons per day. So Ulrich is important because it is the largest of our 3 water plants, but it is also the one plant that serves predominantly the south part of Austin, the south and the central part. It serves residents and wholesale customers, as well as the community of Westlake Hills. The next slide. So I wanted to give an overview of the basin cleaning and essentially why we're doing it and why we need it. If you were to look at an aerial of Ullrich Water Plant, you'll notice that we've got our big sort of swimming pool structures that are in the middle of it. We've got 7 of those, and we've got 2 really big square ones that are about 150-foot squares, and then we've got 4 smaller square ones about 110 foot by 110 foot, and then a circular one that's about 110 foot in diameter. We call those basins upflow clarifiers, and essentially that's where a lot of the critical part of our process occurs. Upstream of those basins, we add our critical chemicals, things like chlorine, ammonia, and ferric sulfate. And then in the basins themselves, they're concrete basins, but they have metal tubes, metal turbines in the middle of them. And what we do is we add lime into those basins, and basically the center pieces of the basins uses a circular motion to help with basically softening the water. Basically what we're doing is we're precipitating calcium carbonate through adding of those chemicals and settling out kind of the stuff that needs to be settled out as part of the water treatment process. So over time, as you can imagine, the calcium carbonate does accumulate on the metal pieces of equipment, especially in the very center of the basin, and obviously on the bottom, because that's where the solids sort of settle out. Basically, our normal maintenance does require us, and what we do is we do wash down our basins on a normal basis, and at least on an annual basis, we do wash them down. We have our own internal equipment that we use, our own hydroblasters and hoses that we use to wash down that equipment. But every so often, and what we're aiming for is about 3 basins a year, we do have to rely on an external contractor to use more high-powered equipment to help us knock off the solids or the scale that is built up on the metal pieces of equipment. And so what you guys would have heard earlier this year was us cleaning Basin 1, and we basically relied on a contractor that has more high-powered equipment, ranging from 10,000 psi to 40,000 psi, to help clean this equipment and really, get it down to as bare metal as possible. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of stuff that's accumulated over time that really just needs to get knocked off. And what that does is it helps us to kind of restore our processes and make them efficient again. You want to move to the next slide. So what we wanted to show here was kind of what was happening on site during the Basin 1 cleaning. We retained a contractor that came out with their hydroblasters. They utilized the compressors, which is really what causes a lot of the noise and the sound that drives that equipment. They also had these big vac trucks that are used to suck up all of the solids that are knocked off into the bottom of the basin, and then they eventually go into these vac boxes that are hauled off the site and disposed of. You can see off the center, the top left picture, you can see kind of the metal center of the basins, but also we've got these radial troughs that are also metal. And so you can see the guys kind of working in the troughs, and they were basically tasked with knocking off the material and getting down to bare metal. The bottom left-hand corner, you can see a guy working down within the draft tube and the skirt of the metal structure in the center, and again, knocking off the accumulated material. The contractor used cranes, and we also used man lifts that were lowered into the basins to gain access to where they needed to get to knock off the scale. And as some of you can probably see, even from Rocky River Road, we do have tall basin walls. So the basin walls range from about 32 to 37 foot high. If you're thinking about the guys that are working on the troughs, they're up at that elevation, hitting the metal with some high powered equipment, and that I think is one of the major sources of the sound is just that metal kind of getting hit with the high pressure water. We did what we did as part of trying to respond to some of the community feedback on sound was build some sound attenuation walls around the equipment that was on the ground. And so that's the equipment that you see in the top right-hand corner. But it is definitely a challenge, to shield the sound that's coming off of the metal equipment kind of in the center of the basin, especially at a height that tall, about 30 feet off the ground. So the other thing that we had going for us, besides the fact that we had guys, hitting metal equipment in a basin, that's 30 feet deep, was also the lime building, which you can also see in the top right-hand corner. And that's a building that basically separates our two basins from the rest of the east side of the plant. And I can only imagine it didn't help with, sound kind of bouncing off of that and kind of heading in the west direction. So if you want to move to the next slide. So this is an aerial showing Basin 1, the extreme western basin on our site, pointed out the lime building, which is that tall rectangular structure that separates basins 1 and 2 from the rest of the site. What we're moving on to next, now that the Basin 1 is complete, is Basin 5. And this is smaller in comparison to Basin 1. It's 110 foot square. And it's got a smaller, middle turbine. It's got less troughs and less that sort of radiate off the middle of the equipment. And the hope and what we anticipate is that because of the smaller basin and because we're on the other side of the lime building, that there will be less sound that will kind of head to the west direction. But also it's a smaller basin. We don't anticipate as much equipment being needed because of how small it is. And we also anticipate that the duration of the work is going to be shorter as a result of the fact that it's smaller. I am showing the proposed staging of our Basin 5 cleaning. One thing to note is that when Basin 1 was being cleaned, we actually staged on the south of that basin, so kind of on the opposite side. Yeah, right there. Thanks, Emily. For this cleaning for Basin 5, we're actually going to stage on the north side of the basin, and that is really because of the need to keep the traffic, the access road open for normal traffic that needs to access the plant. And so this is the Basin 5 cleaning schedule. We anticipate getting that up and running starting next week. Again, I didn't say it, but I think in total on Basin 1, I think we spent about 7 to 8 weeks actually cleaning that basin. We do anticipate the duration of this work to be about 4 weeks, hopefully shorter than that, but we're going to stick with 4 weeks for now. We've reiterated to the contractor this is weekday work only. The work is only to occur, really, the noisy part of the work is really only to occur between the hours of 8 and 5, Monday through Friday. I know that Memorial Day weekend's probably going to hit in the middle of this. We don't plan to allow weekend work or holiday work for the duration of this basin cleaning. And then once we're done with Basin 5 is about when our peak production season starts, when summer's starting, and we need to make sure that we've got maximum capacity at our plant. So we don't anticipate any further basin cleanings. basically until probably the last quarter of this year. So for future basin cleanings, we are actually embarking on a new contract for that work, and that'll cover basically October 2021 and beyond. We will be including noise attenuation requirements in that contract, and that'll put a lot of it on the contractor to basically limit the equipment that he's using, but also to have his own noise attenuation around his equipment. I do want to point out though that you know, as I kind of showed, knowing the height of the equipment and kind of what we're dealing with and what we're cleaning, we don't anticipate that we'll eliminate, you know, all of the noise. We are working towards reducing it, especially compared to what we were observing earlier this year. And then the other thing that we are doing is actively staying on top of our cleanings and making sure that we're doing thorough and routine cleanings with our own lower pressure equipment that we have on site, and you know, trying to reduce the need to rely on the contractor and the heavier, higher powered equipment that ends up being a lot more noisy. So we're staying on top of that, and that should result in, you know, hopefully less duration of that noise. And finally, just wanted to cover our noise monitoring plan. So here at Ulrich, we actually have the luxury of having a health and safety representative on site from Austin Water. And it definitely was helpful to have him on site to help us out with procuring a reliable decibel meter to help us measure the sound coming from the equipment, and that helped us, you know, for the workers that are out here, making sure that they have the right protection for themselves while they're working next to this really loud equipment and making these loud sounds. But also he was able to take measurements along our property line and then around kind of the neighborhoods, just to make sure that we were basically abiding by Westlake's noise ordinances. And over the course of 2 events, we took those measurements and confirmed that we were operating within the noise ordinance. We do anticipate, and we are planning to conducting similar noise monitoring, and that'll start on day 1 when the bigger equipment is used, and we've got, you know, more than, you know, when we've got the equipment out and that it's being actively used to clean, especially, you know, those big metal pieces right in the center of the basin. So we'll continue to do that throughout the course of the Basin 5 cleaning. With that, I'll turn it over to Brian to cover the sound survey.
All right, thanks, Stephanie. So just to kind of summarize where we're at, we did a sound survey back in 2008 as part of that original expansion that built Basins 1 and 2. And at the request of citizens of Westlake, we're going to be updating that survey. One thing to be careful about is the sound survey is a little bit different than sound monitoring that was just described. That handheld device that you saw a picture of doesn't actually record what sound it's picking up. It just gives you a decibel reading. Whereas this sound survey, actually, we're in active consultations with the acoustics engineer. They'll actually be able to record sounds and hopefully identify by listening to them what loud noises that you might be experiencing. And our plan is to basically set up sound monitoring stations on the site, and over a period of time that we're still finalizing, record sounds that are heard. There's certain sounds that are repeated a lot and you can easily identify them. And there's certain things that happen once in a while that are kind of hard to capture. And so by analyzing the different sounds collected, we're hoping that we can come up with some recommendations to improve the quietness of our site overall, as well as during certain special operations like a basin cleaning. So at this point, we're in negotiations with that consultant. We're determining their scope of work. And we still plan on having the sound study completed this summer. And so with that, I'll answer any questions. We're still in the preliminary stage of getting that survey started though.
Thank you, Stephanie and Brian. Appreciate that. So that is the end of our prepared presentation. We're now happy to answer questions. I think if you can find the Q&A button that I believe will be on the bar at the bottom of your screen, you can submit questions that way. And I don't have any questions in the queue yet, so we'll be pausing here to get your questions or comments through there. All right, we have questions starting to come in. Thank you. So I'm going to read the questions, and then whoever on the team has the expertise on this, they'll speak up and provide the answers, and we'll just keep going till we get to the end of our questions. So our first question says, can you speak more about routine cleaning? Would that reduce the need for these intensive 4-week cleanings?
So I'll take that. We are, like I mentioned earlier, we do have a practice of washing down our basins, especially when we have to take them down for maintenance. It's just part of what we do. What we're trying to do is procuring our own. We have our own, 5,000 PSI hydroblasters on site. And what we're actively trying to do is to maximize that equipment, see how we can maximize that equipment to knock off as much as we can in-house. However, as I was showing, with these huge structures, there's only so much you can do with, a 5,000 PSI blaster. So what we're going to do in the coming months as we take basins down is try to be more active and more, prescriptive about trying to knock off as much of that stuff off as soon as we can. However, like I said, it's there's only so much you can do, and so the intent is to be more regular about it, be more deliberate about removing the material with the intent of really trying to minimize the time that the contractor is out here. So I think it's more of working with our maintenance folks and trying to, like I said, be more deliberate about it.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Mm-hmm.
We have a Mr. Barr who said, why can't we speak? So Lydia, will you help me to unmute Mr. Barr, John Barr, and we'd be glad to hear from you directly.
Hello.
Hi, Mr. Barr. Thank you for being here. We'd be glad to hear from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can, yes.
Okay. I was just a couple comments and then questions. Just quick back of the envelope calculation. If it's taking 7 to 8 weeks per big one, per big basin, you've got 3 of those, and 4 weeks for each small one. That works out to 40 weeks every 2 years, which is about, you're planning for us to be experiencing that high level of noise about every other month. Is that correct?
I wouldn't think so. I would need to think about it. What I would anticipate is we're trying to do 3 basins a year. And so, I feel like Basin 1 was a little bit of an exception because it was the first one that the contractor's done and whatnot. But I would assume that it's about a month per basin. And so, that's probably 3 months out of the year that we'd have to deal with it. At least that's kind of what I've been kind of banking on.
Thanks, Stephanie.
All right.
So, go ahead, Mr.
Can
Barr.
I ask another question?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. This is to Brian. about the sound survey. The last survey that was done, they used, and this is getting a little technical, but they used what's called DBA filtering, which takes out all the low sounds. That just kind of as a, so everybody can kind of figure out what we're talking about, is if you've ever been in traffic and a car pulls up to you and they have opera and soprano is singing, that just drives everybody crazy, right? Or is it something else that bothers us? Isn't it not the high soprano that bothers us, but that low rumble that you can really feel more than hear?
Right.
Which one bothers you?
Well, I'll tell you what, sir, I can answer maybe I've inferred your question.
Well, so where I'm going with it is they use DBA filtering, which takes out all that low rumble.
Right.
So are they going to repeat that, or are they going to use DBC?
So, yeah, and pardon me for speaking. I just thought that's kind of where you're going. So DBA and DBC are both standards for measuring decibel. And DBA is what is ordinance required, but DBC actually reflects kind of what people hear and experience a lot. So my opinion on this is we should look at both of them. Now, an ordinance is an ordinance. None of us here wrote it. If they chose DBA for some reason, that's that. But we can definitely look at DBC values and try to understand what you're experiencing. And you mentioned things that you feel more than you hear. Another component to this project that's a little different than last time is we want to hire a seismic monitoring group. So basically, we want to not just capture sound that might travel through the air, but any vibrations that might be coming off site. So as I said, that's a little bit different than what we did before. Our intention is to repeat the previous study just to have something to compare against, but then hopefully we can augment it with some additional services, because our goal really is to figure out what is bothering y'all and making sure that we can prevent it. And some things may cause noise that's unavoidable, but we definitely want to know about it. So does that answer that question, John?
Yes, except that when you talk about the ordinance requires DBA, and earlier you referenced that the noise monitoring that you did met the Westlake Hills sound ordinance. Can you tell me what that ordinance says is the limit for daytime noise?
At this moment, I don't have it in front of me, but I will tell you this. The ordinance is yes, sir. The ordinance is a reference point that we'll keep in our report, but our goal is to reduce audible noise that would bother you, right? Even if it's not just purely an ordinance-based decision. So we need to capture that and understand what we're dealing with. And I think your point about DBA, DBC is valid. They do change. The decibel reading will change dramatically depending on what you're listening to. So there's no reason.
Well, I'm a little concerned because you keep talking about that the levels have met the ordinance. But the current City of Austin ordinance, if I'm not mistaken, is a DBC, not a DBA.
And that may be the case, but my point is that—
And the City of Westlake Hills, unless it's been rewritten, is even more stringent than that, and is based on a frequency curve, and it's not written in DBA or C.
Well, I do know the Westlake one is more stringent, and I guess my point was to say that we're going to consider the proper ordinance language, and whether it's DBA or DBC. I do think we should capture both types of decibel reading. And again, those decibels are a tool to describe sound, but at the end of the day, we're trying to figure out what's causing trouble and fix it. So that's why this acoustic engineer hopefully will give us a little bit more than just, the meter says this, and this is what the ordinance says, you're either good or bad. Hopefully they'll help us track down the source of the sound and tell us what we can do about it.
All right. Well, that would be nice. That is not what the 2008 study did. 2008 study, basically, when you read it, it's a COA, City of Austin, apology document. It basically redefines ordinances and reinterprets them always in the city's favor. And I'm concerned that that if you repeat that,
Mhm.
it's just going to be like, okay, we're good. Have a nice day. Go away. Because
Understood. Yeah, we're not trying to check the box here. We do want to help improve things. I do think we'll want to recapture that survey's points for reference, just because it makes apples to apples comparable. But I do think there's some room for improvement, and that's partly why we're having these consultations. If it was a simple matter of just repeating the study, that is pretty straightforward because it was already done. But we're trying to think about ways to do it better, and hopefully show you everybody that we're doing our due diligence to help lower sound issues that are coming out of the plant.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mr. Barr. We have a couple of other questions, and we can always come back to you if you'd like to have more discussion on this. I'll read the next question. Thank you.
And we also have someone that's raising their hand, so I could get to them first if you want. Just let me know.
Okay, thank you, Lydia. Yeah, let's do that.
All right, Pat, I'm going to unmute you in just a second.
Are you there?
Yes. Hi, Pat. We can hear you. Thanks for joining.
Hi. I just have a quick question. I'm just wondering if y'all have stood on the street right where this is happening for any significant amount of time. I'm just wondering if you've spent any time standing there, sitting there. I challenge you to sit for 10 minutes and imagine what this would be like if this happened on your street. It's incredibly loud. I'll make some cookies and lemonade and you can hang out there for a while and just witness it. I just don't know if you guys have actually been there and experienced it. That's what I'm wondering.
Sure. Members of our team who are here tonight work there daily, and they are there and physically present. Yes.
No, not at the plant. I'm talking about come on over to Rocky River Road on the dead end street and stand there for 15 minutes and experience what it's like to imagine what it's like to live or try to garden or try to read a book outside and witness this noise, because it's really loud. I mean, I think that should be part of your research here, is to not only run some numbers, which I'm glad you're doing that, but I think you should also actually experience what's happening over there.
Sure. And I see Brian is available to speak to that. And as part of the sound survey, we'd be glad to meet with you out there. And so I'm happy for you to follow up with me and we can make arrangements to do that. And I know our team
By the way, I live 2 streets over and I can hear it. It's annoying over here. And so I can't even imagine what my neighbors are going through. It's incredible.
Thank you for your feedback, and we will be glad to meet with you there on site. So feel free to contact me for us to arrange that.
I think we should have a group meeting. Let's have a neighborhood meeting and stand out there all together and we can all talk about it. We should be having this meeting during the cleaning. Honestly.
We typically do have these kind of meetings in the community, and with the pandemic, we've moved to online, and I know that it's we're definitely able to meet up with you outdoors for sure.
I think everybody would really appreciate that. If during the next cleaning, or actually we should have done it back when it was happening and it was really loud. This one will probably be not so loud because it's in the middle of the complex. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that'd be great.
And Emily, we have another person that wants to speak. So again, if you want to give Brian.
Yeah, I want to read some of these questions that have been up here for a while, and then we'll keep moving through it.
Okay.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you. And if you need to speak again later, just put your hand up and we'll do that. So we're going to make sure we get to everyone. I'm going to read the next question that was posted. How often do basins need to be cleaned? More specifically, when will Basin 1 need to be cleaned again?
So I can answer that. The intent is to utilize the contractor to clean 3 of our basins a year. That is our current plan. And as I mentioned earlier, the intent is for us to use our own equipment to clean on an annual basis all of our basins as they come out, of operation. We normally clean them, but we'll be, again, more deliberate with how we clean them and being more strategic about making sure to knock as much of the material off as possible, which should in turn, in 2 years or 3 years from February or January, when Basin 1 comes around again for needing to be clean, the result should be that it requires less of a duration, less noise, because we won't need as high power equipment to clean it again.
Thank you, Stephanie. Our next question that came in a little while ago says, I would like to see the engineering on the sound baffle unit. Seems like a 4-sided structure, 3 sides and a top, and portable could surround the external pump unit and dampen the noise quite a bit. So this might be for you, Stephanie. I think this might be referring to the sound attenuation that we'll be requiring from the contractor for future cleanings. Can you speak to this a little more?
So the sound of 3 sides and a top. Yeah. So yes, that is we did build. We actually had our maintenance guys put together I think it was more 2-sided sound wall around the around that equipment that was on the ground. I think for this future contract that we're going to embark on with the new a new contract for the future work, we'll prescribe more as far as just fully enclosed kind of equipment. But again, I'll point out that even the equipment that we had out for Basin 1 was surrounded by trees, and it wasn't up against the property line and whatnot. I still think that a lot of the sound is actually coming from what's actually happening in the basin. So we'll also be wanting to control that to some extent as well.
Okay, and we have a question that came in on the chat. The trailers placed against the fence near Rocky River have had compressors running in the past that were incredibly loud. Has that equipment been moved to the front of the buildings towards the plant? So trailers with compressors. Was that part of the cleaning activity?
I mean, my first read of that would say, that is that equipment, and that was the same equipment I was showing on one of the slides. That equipment has been removed from the site, so it's no longer on site right now. When they come in next week to clean Basin 5, they'll bring similar equipment out, but it'll be placed on the north side of the basins and kind of the middle of the site itself.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, I think so. We've answered the questions that have been typed in, and now Doris has asked to speak. Lydia, will you help to unmute Doris?
All right, take it away, Doris.
Okay, I have a couple comments. Can you hear me?
We can, yes. Thank you for being here.
Okay, so I know there was comments made about the ordinances, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because I have several questions. I just want you to know, as you know, I was with your sound meter guy, and we were comparing our 2 meters so that we knew that they were reading similar. And, I was getting 110 decibels over here outside at my home and 60 decibels inside with all windows closed.
Wow. Okay.
So I just want you to know that. And of course, further out in the street, when I go 2 neighbors out, so my 400 feet out the driveway and down, and then I was getting 85 to 90 there. And I wondered if you could share with us the ordinance for City of Austin when an industrial structure like the water treatment plant is next to a residential within 150 feet of a residence. What is the ordinance under those particular circumstances?
So actually, in the time that I was asked that last question, I went and looked up what the ordinance quote was in the 08 study. And what they reference here in City of Austin was a 70 dB threshold for DBA zoning. And again, that may have changed in the last 10, 12 years, but at this point, we need to compare ordinances for sure, but we also need to figure out, what you're experiencing. And obviously, if you're hearing things that are 60 decibels, that's pretty loud. So no matter what the ordinance says, we need to understand the source of the noise and try to figure out what we can do about it.
But are there specific ordinances? It's different if you say a house is causing sound for another house because maybe they're having a party or what have you. In this case, it's 24/7 industrial complex next to residences. What ordinance? That should be different than an ordinance for an industrial complex where everything is industrial versus an industrial complex, because the green water treatment plant doesn't have neighbors that close, and the green's not Ulrich either. Not by one.
Understood. And of course, Green's no longer with us, but your point's noted. And again, I apologize not having all the ordinances in front of me here, but I do know that ordinances are one data point to make sure we're meeting them. But then there's levels beyond that we want to understand. And again, our goal here isn't to check a box and make a report that doesn't help anything. Our goal is to try to understand what y'all are experiencing and making sure that we can do reasonable things to address them. So again, and then as you mentioned earlier, Westlake actually has a different ordinance. So they don't have a simple dB threshold like City of Austin did at this time. So again, I'm not an acoustic engineer, so I don't want to get too technical on its interpretation, but just understand that our goal here is to actually do something that's helpful. And so we're trying to.
Yes, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate that you understand that an industrial complex is a lot different than living next to a house that has a periodic party. So it's more of there's never a downtime. On the mitigation, getting to solution, we know there's lots of problems, but the solutions, like I realize that the basins are up high. Believe me, I realize that. And I realize that you're saying that if you're going to clean 3 a month each, of which really this first one took 3 months total in time. I realized there was some interruption, but if we're doing even if life was perfect, that's 3 months out of the year. That's a quarter of our life. Every year you will be cleaning these basins. That sounds like it would be reasonable, knowing that these are regular cleanings and that much of our life, that you would build, even mitigating, as one of the residents who is an engineer, mitigating mobile unit to be put up around the basins themselves as well. I also understand from City of Austin ordinances that a neighbor pointed out with a lot of rumble and bass, like when music venues downtown are sitting next to residential areas. City of Austin has ordinances for changing windows and mitigating sound based on that lower rumble, etc. And that might, I think, maybe need to be looked at. And then for selfish purposes, Basin 2 is going to be just like Basin 1, because you've already explained to us when you get to big ass Basin 2, the equipment is going to sit on this side because you can't go on the other side, like you said. The line building is still going to be there. As a matter of fact, it's going to be even one basin closer to the line building to bounce off. So I would like to know when Basin 2 is going to be clean, because I definitely cannot inhabit this residence at that time. But I do want to thank you for letting me know that you're starting May 17th, because my daughter and I will be relocating to a friend's house for 1 month. But I would like to know when Basin 2 is going to be done.
Thanks. And we'll definitely let you know. I mean, we'll give you advance notice of when we know it's going to be done. My best estimate would be that we wouldn't do it until, probably a year from, basically, the beginning of next year. And what that does, it also gives us time to do this sound attenuation study with Brian, and also to it also allows us to work into our contract with the contractor that's going to be on site to make sure that his equipment has sound attenuation, and that he's got limitations on how much noise he can produce as part of the contract. So,
and on that sound study, you're going to do it when the regular operation is going on as well as when they're cleaning, or what is the plan there?
So the purpose of the sound study is to capture regular operation first, because that's never going to change, right? And so we want to make sure we know what that is. But there's also point sources of noise that we're trying to capture. So this cleaning operation, as you all know, is the first time we've done it in a while. And so if we can have the cleaning operation happen during the sound survey, that would be great. But based on basin demand, the survey we think will happen in the summer. And that's usually when we want to keep our basins online for making water. If we do want to do something like a kind of a follow-up visit, explicitly to capture the sound during a basin cleaning, that's something we'll have to talk about. But our survey attempt is to capture a baseline of what the plant's doing day in and day out, so that we can make sure those continuous sounds are managed as well as possible. And then on top of that, there's probably going to be just an additional effort with our decibel meter and perhaps even some other acoustic expertise to figure out what to do with these other sound sources that are intermittent.
Okay, and when you expanded the water treatment plant, I had the PE, the superintendent, and various people in my house, in my bedroom. I hope there'll be more response to and different comments being made as to what the effect is for the residents, for the residents over here. And also, I just, when we met with you guys, I realize there's COVID, but when we met with you guys February last year, we were promised sound study would be done. I didn't realize it would be, this far out. So we are aware that we're still waiting for the proper sound study.
And we do recognize that it's a little bit behind the schedule that we discussed last year. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we've had some retirements, and then the pandemic is definitely a factor for us too in some of these projects. So we recognize that it is not on the schedule we had originally discussed. I think tonight we've gotten a lot of good feedback that will be able to be incorporated into the study, and we'll be giving you updates for sure and throughout the summer. Anything you wanted to add on that, Brian?
I was just going to mention, we had a meeting today with the acoustic engineer. So just to let you know, we are moving on it, and we are working out the details of what he needs to measure and what they need to do so that we can hopefully solve some of these issues you guys are having.
Yes, and I would love for someone to reach out to me, because I have my notes from the years past of the meetings that I had and the comments that were made by the engineer and the recommendations that they made for sound mitigation, et cetera. I'd love to share those notes to at least help your sound engineering people know, from years past, and, what's really, also going on, and what, to help them maybe pinpoint more about the noise.
Thank you, Doris. We'll be glad to do that. If I send you an email, can we schedule a time to have a call or have a meeting?
Yeah, once you have your sound person, sure.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Doris, were there other points you'd like to cover? I have a couple of other questions coming in.
No, you can let others people speak, because I'm sure you'll hear from me again.
Okay. Well, if you want to speak again during the meeting, just let us know and we'll put you back on. So I have a comment here that says the cleaning seems to be normal operation. So I think that may be related to the study, maybe just wanting to make a point that this cleaning is part of normal operation, even though it's not happening every day.
If you want, I can take a crack at it, Stephanie. So our basin cleaning, the normal basin cleaning that we do without a contractor, does happen every year, but it usually happens in the wintertime. So I guess my thinking is, if we want to make an explicit survey of the cleaning process, allow us to talk offline, because our original approach was to capture a baseline operation first. There's probably opportunity for that, but we need to make sure I understand the implications of it. But since this sound study is supposed to happen, I know it's overdue, and so we're trying to get it to y'all as soon as we can. our attempt was to try to get it to you this summer so that we can have that baseline. If we do need to postpone it to allow for winter maintenance activities to be captured, we can talk about that internally. But at this point, our survey approach was not around cleaning activities because we were trying to capture what happens on a day in, day out basis. There may be a need for doing some additional survey work around particular activities though.
Thanks, Brian. And, we have our email list, and so we can provide updates as the team goes back and considers this input they're hearing tonight. We have another question asking, can you put a lid on the basins?
So I'll say that we've sort of talked about that, but I mean, just from you think about how they do work on a tank, a big, elevated storage tank or a big reservoir. And when they do that, they put at least a shroud over it. We've talked about that as a possibility. I mean, just given the size, the sheer size of the basins, I don't see how we would do it, but it's something that we'll talk about internally. I mean, as far as covering the basins normally, it's just not how we would want to operate it. And we have to have eyes on what's going on. Like I said, there's a lot of critical processes that go on in that basin, and our operators are sort of trained to be able to look at it and know what's going on, to know whether things are going well in the basin or not. So I guess my first reaction would be that we wouldn't do that on a permanent basis, but we have talked about, what would it look like if we at least temporarily covered it, from a sound standpoint.
All right, there was a follow-up asking about a permanent lid. I think you've already addressed that, Stephanie.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see if there's anyone else who would like to speak, or if there's more questions that are coming in. I think we've gotten some really great feedback that will be helpful during the sound study that Brian is getting started. I will be sure and send updates on a regular basis, and we will follow up on the questions that you've posed tonight on how those can be incorporated. I've changed the slide over, so if you haven't visited the page, we do have a web page dedicated to Ullrich Water Treatment Plant. On there, there's a link you can click and sign up to get email updates. I know many of you have done that. That's
and we do have one more person that I believe wants to.
Okay. I'll just finish this up. So if you signing up for those emails is like the best way to make sure you're keeping informed. I just wanted to say that. I know some of you have emailed me directly, and I try to be sure and forward the emails to you, but if I'm out of the office sometime, my colleagues will be able to send emails out through that email list if you sign up on the project webpage. And then, yes, Lydia, go ahead. And I think we might have a couple of folks who want to speak.
All right, I'm asking Greg to unmute themselves. We'll see if it works. It's kind of glitching on my end.
Okay. So Greg, I think that the line is open if you want to unmute and speak.
Well, I always have to ask them to unmute, and Greg, I'm clicking on it. It's not working. Let me go back to you. It looks like John wants, oh, no, Greg, I think we can hear you now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, Greg.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry about that. My name is Greg Durham, and first, and I'm just going to be very, very brief. First, I just want to thank everybody from the water treatment plant to the neighbors, everybody for taking the time to show up tonight and talk about this. I hope if there is one takeaway from this for you all on the water treatment side is that this is really, really serious. I live a quarter mile away as the crow flies, which I never knew before this issue came up. But I think it was January, I was sitting outside one day on a beautiful day, and I heard this noise, and I thought, that's interesting. What is that? But there's a lot of construction going on. And so I didn't give it much thought. But when it went on for 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, I became really curious. So I said to my son one day, I said, let's take a walk and figure out where that's coming from. And so we located it at the water treatment plant. And that's when I decided to measure and see how far away I lived, which was a quarter mile. So that's pretty far. I can hear it inside my house with the windows closed. Now, it's not it's not ear shattering. It's not that bothersome inside, but I say that just to impress upon you that a quarter mile away inside with my windows closed, I can hear what is going on. So my hope is that the noise mitigation, the noise attenuation, different things that can be tried as we move into the future, that this will move this forward, and that you all understand that there's been a lot of talk about decibel levels and all this stuff tonight. Honestly, I don't care what decibel levels are. If I'm sitting out in my yard a quarter mile away and I can't do a work call on a beautiful day in January because of the drone in the background, that's not an acceptable quality of life, especially if it's 3 months out of the year. So that's all I have to say. And again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for answering our questions. And I am hopeful that we will start to make some progress on this. And so thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And it is helpful for our team to hear the specifics, and so they can pass that on to our sound study engineers. Thank you so much.
And we've got one more. John wants to make another quick comment.
Sure.
So, John, I'm going to ask you to.
Alrighty. Again, thank you all for taking the time. I just wanted to, when we're meeting like this, an observer would think like, wow, you guys are really being responsive in a very positive and proactive way, and you're saying all the right things. I want to just kind of note the level of communication that we feel from our end is not quite at that same level. We had a meeting, it was pre-COVID, from our neighborhood when Doris found out, not from any communication from Ulrich, but found out about all of the different construction projects that were being bid out over the next several years. And we poured through those and looked through them, and it looked like, okay, it looks like most of these things are really not going to impact us, and we'll kind of let it slide and let it go. And then all of a sudden, at the first of this year, this cleaning comes up, which none of us have been heard about. And when we talked to, when we, I'll say complained, the report that we got back was everything is within acceptable limits. And it's just like, what? As Greg said, no, it is not acceptable when you're a neighbor and you're trying to live through it. And so that's where, I want to say we're very frustrated, and it just sounds like you guys say really good things in a meeting like this, but the follow through is just not there. And that's when when I say 3 months out of the year with this cleaning operation stuff that you're doing, that is now apparently going to be the new normal for us. And it's just unacceptable. It is just unacceptable. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. And I appreciate you being candid. And I'm committed to doing better for sure, and to being more in touch with you all. I think last year we hadn't had some regular meetings because there hadn't been projects at the plant. It was just sort of operations as usual. And now that we do have some projects coming up and that the cleanings are happening, we recognize that we need to be more in contact with neighbors and sending more frequent updates. And I hope that the next time we have a meeting that you'll see that follow-up has changed, and that you're hearing from us when you need to. So I know the proof's in the pudding, and so I'll be committed to working with the team to make that happen. I want to just see if there's any additional comments, feedback, questions. We don't have a specific end time for this meeting, and we want to be here as long as we need to. This is always kind of like the awkward pause part of the meeting because I want to just make sure I'm not ending it when someone's about to raise their hand or ask a question. If I was better at improv, then I would entertain y'all during this little pause at the end of the meeting.
You do have some good jokes.
Oh, I've told some jokes in previous meetings. Someone actually, an attendee, sent me some joke ideas from their kid. But it's kind of looking quiet, so I think we're wrapping it up here. We appreciate your time, and we are listening, and we will be following up on the things we talked about tonight. I will send some regular updates during the cleaning that's starting on Basin 5. Sometimes things do come up. I know y'all mentioned that there were some pauses on the work when Basin 1 cleaning was happening. If anything like that is coming up, I will send updates. And I'll be meeting with the team weekly, and I'll be sending you all updates if anything changes. So I just want to thank you all for being here, and stay safe and have a good evening.